So in this video, we're going to dive into the verses and just kind of tell you about the thought process behind producing them, talk about the instrumentation, and pull out some key parts and show you kind of what we did. Why don't you go ahead and play them the first bit of that, Christian, so they can check it out.
We were careful with our touch, attempting to hold back all that we want.
Cool. So Christian, as the producer on this session, tell us a little bit about your thought process, kind of the first things that popped in your head when you sat down to produce the verses out.
Yes, so the verses, we just want to keep super simple to contrast the chorus, which has a lot of layers. We just really wanted the vocals to take the front seat in both the verses. So there's just, kind of simple piano part, drum part with some cool layers we'll show you later, and some soft acoustic strumming in the background to keep rhythm.
Yeah, it's really a pretty basic part. Yeah, piano, soundscapes, acoustic guitar, and drums. So nothing crazy. Dylan has such a big, kind of deep, kind of robust voice. So I think the piano complements it well. Obviously, the mood of the piano is very, kind of somber and goes with the vocals and sets the mood. We opted for the piano over the acoustic guitar, although there is a little acoustic guitar in there, and we show you kind of our process for recording that in a different video. But you'll notice that they're very low, kind of just more like a texture, a little rhythm in the background. We left it in because Dylan plays live, so we wanted him to be able to, reproduce this live. But the reason we went with the piano as the lead instrument in the verses, and I guess throughout the whole song, versus the guitar as the lead instrument, is because since he's making that transition from country to more pop, the acoustic guitar led version just sounded too country, so we decided to go with the big kind of atmospheric piano sound. I think that's really the kind of vibe behind building the verse and what we wanted it to accomplish. So let's dive into, we'll kind of break it down, show you each part. Again, there's only piano, some ambient stuff, the acoustic guitar, which we show in another video, and then the drum. So not much to go through here, but I want to show you some key kind of pieces that Christian will talk through, some of the little ear candy stuff that really makes the song. So let's dive into the piano first. So one of the toughest parts about having piano as a lead instrument is that most of us won't have real pianos to use. If you do have a real piano, awesome. Go for it. Go use it. But a lot of us are going to be using keyboards and or plugins, maybe a contact instrument, a couple decent ones in there, maybe one that comes with your DAW. In this case, we were kind of lucky and had a friend of ours bring over a Nord, which is a real nice keyboard. And it happens to have some pretty real piano sounds in it. But there's some processing that we did to this that I feel if you do try on your recordings are going to help your piano sounds too, especially if you're using a keyboard or a plugin. So Christian, why don't you just play them the piano sound there solo, and we'll talk a little bit about the processing that we did. So pretty good sound just right out of the keyboard there. The part's simple, whole note part. So we needed the chords to kind of ring big and carry out through the song. And a couple of plugins that we really love on pianos to help them sort of sound a little bit more real are the LA2A. We use the UAD one. Settings there are, what is it, about 20 on peak reduction, 20 on gain.
Yeah.
The LA2A just really adds just some robustness to the sound of the piano. A lot of the plug-in and keyboard pianos can sound a little thin on the bottom, and this is one of the ways we kind of beef it up down there. And if you don't have the UAD one, that's fine. Waves makes one. There's could be a version with your DAW or a slate version or something. That's not important, but in general, we really like the sound of the LA2A on a fake piano, and real ones too. But in this case, we're usually working with fake pianos. We also did EQ, and having a nice EQ kind of, I wouldn't call it a surgical EQ necessarily, but pretty clean EQ. The one that we're using is the Harrison Console EQ by UAD, the 32C SE. If you have trying to think of alternatives, if you have a kind of SSL strip maybe from the Waves plugins or anything like that, it'll work. Essentially, all we're doing here, Christian, is you want to tell them what you did here?
Yeah, this is kind of preset that I just pulled up, but honestly, it just kind of really smooths out the top end, and like it adds a lot of top end to it, but it doesn't make it bright and kind of harsh. It's very, very smooth, which is why I like the EQ on the or this specific EQ on the piano. So boosting pretty heavy in the top and mids, and this setting is boosting the lows too, which I honestly cut out with the with just a channel EQ from Logic because I don't need any of that.
Yeah, we'll talk about how we're getting that later. Yeah, so just to clean, so let's show them kind of a before and after. And something interesting too about this particular piano patch is when we're boosting the highs, we're up around like 8K on that top shelf on the Harrison EQ. It's sort of pulling some noise out, but it's cool because it makes it sound a little bit more real, like you're getting kind of some mic, noise happening in there. So why don't you play it for them dry, Christian, and then with the plugins. So here it is dry. So pretty big difference. So if you're dealing with a piano that isn't real, it's a plug-in or keyboard, a really good, I would invest in a really good EQ that you can kind of push the high end pretty far without the plug-in sounding crappy, because that's going to help. And also the LA2A is just a wonderful choice for the piano. Now in the mixing part of this tutorial, Jonathan may have some other tricks that he does to even enhance the piano farther. So let's talk about now, Christian. There's a little trick that I like that you do that I feel really adds a lot to the piano sound, especially again these kind of thinner keyboard and plug-in piano sounds. And that's essentially what? You want to explain what you got going on down there?
Yeah, so down here under this track, a swell synth is a patch that I have from the Prophet that I recorded, and I used the same MIDI that we recorded the piano with, and it's kind of this electric piano sound that's really nice and smooth, and kind of some cool stuff happening in the background of it after the initial attack of the chord fades away. That just really adds body and a warmth to the piano that I thought really suited this track, so I'm going to play it for you solo here. So really cool.
Yeah.
EPM
Not only
sound.
is it kind of adds that bottom end and more robustness to the piano. Is that a word, robustness? Yeah. Makes it robust. That's where a lot of the kind of room and dimensions coming from. Yeah. It allows you to not wash out that piano. If you just take that piano track and add reverb to it, it's going to start washing, kind of collapsing, and the transients aren't going to be as clear. So this is sort of this kind of almost, I like to call it kind of a warm blanket that's around the piano. So the piano is more the top end kind of hitting, and then the synth part in here is adding kind of that warm blanket. And regardless of this being, we used a Prophet for this, but one thing we want to push is that it's just really not gear specific. Like knowing the exact little patch makes it really is not important in the big picture. just listen to kind of the tonality that part has.
The timbre.
Yeah, I just consider it kind of an electric piano part. Almost like slightly like a synth Rhodes kind of thing. Yeah. So start there, and experiment and find kind of, those lush synth pads that work under your piano part.
Yeah.
You want to play on the piano without that and then with it?
Yep. Yeah, I'll play 2 chords of the piano soloed, and then 2 chords. I'll solo the synth too. So they really, combine and make a really cool sound.
Big difference. So, guys, that's how we process the piano in the verses. Let's move on to the drums in the verse. So let's take a look at the drums, which we program. There's no live drums in here. This is all just samples and loops that we've kind of put together and arranged. And I just want to sort of walk through and show you kind of some key parts. Essentially what we were going for with this beat, which we kind of alluded to in earlier in the video, is that the song's kind of ballady, but it's really easy to make, ballad drums and rhythms cheesy. And since our goal for this client was to help him make a modern pop song, we took some elements, some rhythms and certain samples that you may find in a ballad, but kind of updated them a little bit, which I think is kind of what made this part really cool. So let's start with the kicks. We're just going to kind of show you what's going on. Christian, tell them what you got going with the kick drums there, and maybe play them a piece.
Yeah, so there's 3 kind of kick things in the verse. There's this long kind of bouncy one that hits on the first beat of every measure, and then there's kind of this kick label, kick 1. That's the main kick of the verse, just kind of super low-endy thud that does the actual kick rhythm. And then there's also this little tom kick thing that's just kind of like a filtered verby hit, again, that happens on the downbeat of every bar, just to kind of create space at the start of every measure.
So why don't you play them those just the kicks there soloed. So in a lot of cases, we're using like 2-3 different kick samples, and they're not always layered. That's what a lot of people think, like, oh, you're using 2 or 3 kick samples, then they're all layered in a line doing a rhythm. That's not always the case. If you're listening to songs on the radio with programmed drums, listen real close. You can hear like just slightly different tonalities of the same sample, kind of going back and forth, and that's what creates just cool dimension when you're programming drums. Obviously, since this is a slower tune, we had a lot of space. So what is that on that kick 2? Why don't you tell them how you made that kind of long? This is sort of an idea you guys can use. You can always do like an 808 big kind of impact hit, but tell them kind of what you did on that.
Yeah, I took this sample that was originally just a really short kick similar to this one, and I went ahead and pitched it down an octave in Logic, and then just stretched it out, and I kind of got these cool stretching of the transients that kind of bounced in time. So I'll play I'll solo it for you guys and kind of listen to the bounce that the kick has on the decay of it. So there's a cool little texture throw in there. Again, we have so much space in the bar for kind of extra things that it wasn't adding a bunch of drums. It was just kind of making each part stand out and have a cool tail or decay to it.
Yeah, so if you, it's almost like a cinematic kind of impact, something you'd hear like in a movie trailer or something. And if you don't have a collection of, cinematic kind of impacts, or maybe the cinematic impacts that you have are a little too overbearing, a little too epic sounding, it's a great way to take a kick, whatever DAW that you have. Most of them have a time stretch feature. Stretch it out and really push it past, push it past its breaking point, and pitch it down. You'll just kind of have this almost, slow motion sort of sound there. So Let's dive into play them the tom kick real quick too. So on top of this kind of slow motion sounding impact kick,
kind of just
it can get lost a little bit. So you may want to layer something that's a little bit of a higher tonality kick drum in there.
So nothing too crazy, just higher pitched kick with some reverb on it that kind of helps the ear focus on this kick too when they both hit, so you can kind of tune in and hear it and kind of hear the decay after, which is cool.
It's pretty simple, It sounds like way cooler than next. Not much to really get that. You have one that's doing your regular pattern, one that's kind of this impact, and just simply a third one that kind of highlights that impact kick there and brings it a little bit up closer in the mix. So let's dive into the kind of snares, which I probably shouldn't say snare drums because they're not really snares. So again, we talked about the ballad thing. If we had these big ballad snares, we just felt that just be kind of too cheesy, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, just too cheesy for a modern pop record. But something that we did kind of take inspiration from the ballad, era ballad drums is the side stick, and the drummer would kind of have the stick down and hit the rim, so it was less abrasive than a big snare hit. We sort of just took that, and what do you got? Kind of like a couple of those.
Yeah, so there's the rim shot that is kind of the decay of this. Like, you can picture these as just one snare drum. So this is kind of, I pretty much used it for the decay of the note. This perc snare is kind of the meat of it that hits, and this digi snare is kind of the top end that, again, helps it kind of stick out. But they all act together as one thing.
Yeah, so that's another thing. If you're getting into kind of layering drums, if you're new to it or have been experimenting with it, I know we've got the question a lot, like, well, how do I layer? What's the thing? And that's a pretty good starting point, especially on a snare. One sample will kind of have that meat. One will have the decay, and then the other may have more of kind of the top end, or maybe an initial kind of crack to it. Attack to it. So play them just the snares soloed there so they can check it out. So it sounds like on one you also have kind of some rhythmic like delays going on.
Yeah, so that's part of the decay, and that's this rim shot right here. And I just used a patch in Echo Boy that I thought sounded really cool. It's kind of got some reverb elements to it, as well as a delay that comes in one of the speakers. So I'll take off the Echo Boy and let you hear the original sample, and then I'll turn it on. So it just adds a lot of cool space to that.
Yeah, again, since there's so much space in the arrangement, it's like so now you're kind of starting to see how these different elements come together. We have that kick drum impact that has the boom, 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 kind of takes up that space, since everything's based on these whole notes. So that's kind of taking up some space. This rim shot here with the delay that's kind of throwing around. If it didn't have that stuff, that ear candy in it, would, if you just had boom, you know what I mean? It'd sound really, really boring. Totally. So that's just kind of some things in there. Now the most, I'd say, sort of key thing here in this drum part on the verses that's adding the texture, which you probably noticed, is the hat part, which is kind of these really sort of slushy hats. It's adding, kind of the human feel to it, and pretty prominent part. Let's show them those hats there. So we prefer to have libraries of really, human sounding hat grooves of different tonalities and different size cymbals and all that stuff, because programming hats and trying to make them sound real can be a little tough. It's probably the toughest part. So I believe these are from one of our packs over at Woodshed Audio. We have an Essentials hi-hat pack that just has a lot of different rhythms and tempos and dark ones and more bright ones, and that's where we got this. But Christian, show them kind of how you take it a step further. So when you have these packs, you don't just have to go with what's in there. How did you put this little loop together?
Yeah, so I went ahead. I kind of had an idea in my head of what I wanted it to be like. So each of these little chops that I have are actually part of full loops that I'll pull out here that I just took from the hi-hat pack by Woodshed. And here, I'll play it for you. This simple chord note hi-hat. I took that one, and then also I took this loop. So 2 different loops. Play this one really quick. Which I thought sounded cool on their own, but I wanted to take elements from each. I wanted to, have the hits, but also have the smaller accent hits. So I just went ahead and, as you can see, kind of chopped every half bar, or each measure, whatever. So I had all those separate hits, and then I just copied and pasted them together to make what I thought in my head would sound cool.
Yeah, and if you don't have something in your head, then use the loops for inspiration. Drag maybe 3 or 4 from the same, pack. You could use different hi-hat packs and sort of have them sound, vary throughout the riff. But we took all these from the same sort of cymbal, I believe. They're all from the same pack. Mm-hmm. Yeah, drop 3 or 4 in and just snag little bits at a time, and rearrange them, and you'll start getting kind of these rhythms. So these hi-hat loops already sounded, had a nice human element to them. But now you can make them a little bit even more kind of customized by mixing them up that way. And this hat part is definitely a big part of the drums. Why don't you solo the drums so they can kind of hear everything together? And just listen to how the hats move the track. They're playing a pretty important role. Yeah. Mute the hats and just listen without it. So that may be cool for like if we were doing more like a R&B thing or something, but the big slushy hats just really give it some vibes. So we dig that. And there's kind of one last thing I saw that you had in here, Christian, that we did. And this is a very common thing that we do a lot and recommend that you start trying it out. And that's taking percussion loops. Is this from another Woodshed pack?
No, That Sound.
That Sound pack. Any kind of percussion pack that you have. So shakers, tambourines, things like that. And stretching them out so that they sound a little more degraded. Just show them.
Yep.
Show them the original and then show them kind of what...
So this is the original shaker. It's super simple.
Yeah. It's like that in the track would be just too much. Even if it was kind of, a different feel.
Right.
It's just too much. Where we're just trying to add a little bit of grit and texture underneath.
Right. So I went ahead and used Logic's time stretch feature and stretched it to 4 times its size. So it's 8 bars. And it sounds like this. So now you got this kind of pushy, pulling, shaking thing. And to complete it and make it fit into the track, I just went ahead and put a wave sound shifter on it and dropped it down an entire octave right here. And that's how I got this sound.
Yeah, so we do that a lot, even with full drum loops or with shaker parts or even hi-hat parts.
Yeah.
It just adds this, again, kind of gritty texture in the background. Of course, you can sort of, when we're soloing it, hear the artifacts, but it just adds some cool ear candy in the background and has sort of a subliminal effect almost. It's just like this grit kind of in the back that you may not recognize, but without it, it's certainly losing something.
Yes.
So that's the drums. Let's talk a little bit about, there's only one more piece, and that is these kind of ambient textures that we're using, as well as kind of how we're spicing up the second verse so that it grows from the first verse. So there's really only two little small details left that I want to talk about. And one is some sort of ambient, just kind of non-melodic texture that we put behind the verse to sort of enhance that soundscape feel that it has. And then I also want to chat a little bit about how we make the second verse more interesting than the first. So Christian, why don't you show them these ambient sort of textures that we're talking about. You want to play that for him? Cool. So you can hear it's just, kind of this, lush cloud of noise essentially. But it's adding that kind of soundscape feel. So tell me, Christian, kind of where you got these sounds, why you added it in, and sort of what you feel it adds to the track.
Yeah, so a lot of samples or kind of sound or loops like these I get from a website called Splice.com that we have a membership to, and it's really cool. You guys should check it out. You can go there and you pay a small membership fee a month, and you get credits that you can use as downloads of samples, or you can get like presets for like serum and synths like that. So there's a pack on there called Abstractions, and it's a bunch of these weird noises. Some of them are more melodic and more rhythmic than others, and a bunch of different tempos and keys, which are all labeled in the pack. And so I found 3 of them that I thought would sound cool kind of behind this beat in the verse, and they also go in the chorus too. But it kind of just fills cracks between the drum beat and just adds cool noise and texture and vibe to the drum part, so it doesn't sound so programmed and stiff. And of course I stretched all of them to fit the time signature of the piece, and also use a wave sound shifter to pitch them all to the same key. And I'll just kind of solo each one real quick for you so you can hear what's going on. So it's not anything insane. They're super low in the mix. I think will kind of really help you see what they're doing is if I just play the drum bus, and I'll turn them off at first, then turn them on, and it just kind of lets the drums kind of breathe, and it just makes it sound like a more real part, and something that you can kind of get lost in instead of this boring boom boom thing.
Definitely some trickery, because I was curious as to why you had that in your drum bus. So it is sort of part of that. Mm-hmm. If you're doing any kind of like dark pop or ambient stuff, I mean, layers of that's how they get that sound. It's just a lot of layers of these sort of random textures happening in the background, so you can go with it. Yeah, we'll play them the example there.
Cool. So this is with them off, and then I'll turn it on halfway through. It's really cool adding stuff like that, because the drums can only hit so hard if you have nothing else to compare the sound to, whereas if they're sitting in this bed of kind of weird, like washed out sounds in the background, then they're kind of popping out of that soundscape that makes them really hit. And I think it's something really cool to add to your drums that make it sound professional, make it not sound like a demo,
Drum production voodoo.
Yeah.
That's cool. So the other kind of last thing here in the verse, y'all, is we have another video later on that you'll watch where we kind of talk about how we build the choruses each time, and kind of the progression of the full arrangement. And we did that a little bit in the second verse. So simple, sometimes in some productions the second verse is way, way different or way bigger. For this, we just really added, what was it, like one part or a couple parts?
2 parts. Yeah.
2 parts. just to add some interest to the second verse, since it's kind of a slow, sort of drudgy song. We don't want the listener to kind of, lose interest or get bored when that second verse comes around. So we added some more rhythmic things to kind of almost make it seem like it's going a little faster. So you want to show them what we added there?
Yeah, so keep in mind in the chorus video when we talk about the growing of the chorus, the first chorus doesn't have any drums. So that technically makes the first verse more subdivided, more rhythmic than the chorus. So when we go into the second verse, the first half of it is exactly the same as the others. I just bring back in the kick, snare, hi-hat groove, and it's like, back to, kind of subdivided beats that, you kind of lose in the chorus, where the chorus grows in size. It doesn't grow rhythmically yet, so it's cool when it jumps back in. You're like, back to here, where the chorus sounds a little crazy. So we start off like this.
All I wanted was too much. All you gave me was never enough.
So by that point, you get it. You've already heard this before. Yeah. So that same bell lead that's in the chorus, that's in the intro, I just went ahead and copied and pasted it over. Kind of fit perfectly behind his little phrases in the verse. So you'll hear it coming in the ba-da-da-da-da. That just kind of fills the space, and again is a precursor to the same thing that happens in the chorus. But what really helps the second part of this verse move is this synth labeled boops.
It's a technical term.
It's just a driving dotted eighth synth that's kind of like an ARP, but it just helps it really pick up in speed so you don't get tired. And I'm going to solo it, and then I'll play it on the track. It's weird because it is kind of a hard part. If you hear it soloed, you're kind of like, that sounds like an EDM thing or something. But it really, really helps that second verse pick up, because it is such an abrasive part that when you hear it come in, you're so distracted from the rest of it that it, kind of feels like it's really moving and driving.
Yeah, and because the first verse in this is technically like smaller in essence than the verses where the drums drop out, we didn't really have to add much to the second verse to get it going. It's just about keeping some interest. So why don't we sort of leave on this note, Christian? We'll close this video out by showing them kind of the last half of the first verse through that first chorus, the kind of deconstructed chorus, in through the second verse. So you guys can hear kind of the entire sort of build there.
Hi. So please don't drive me now. Don't drive me now. All I wanted was too much. All you gave me was never enough. It hasn't been this way